Oh, mama. Welcome back to Kings of the North. It's good to be back, Landis. Doug Lesmerises and Bill Landis back at home briefly. Just like a little tiny visit back home, and then we're back on the road, Bill.
We are home long enough to have to shovel some snow this morning. So I'm feeling particularly northy.
You know what's good for shoveling snow? Swords. You just slice right through. God, it's good to have these babies back in my hands. Oh, God, it feels so good. Because you know what this is, Bill? This is a 2-sword season. 3 Northern teams in the semifinals. It was hard for me to be down there and with my fake swords. And I'm home with my babies. But the TSA says I can put swords in checked baggage. They're not going to fit. They're too long.
You don't need them. You don't need them. You're going to an all-north banger. You don't need swords.
So let's. This is not just chit chat. This is real KOTN content. When I'm going to a North versus North game, do I need the swords less or do I need the swords more? Because then but not for defense, but more just to walk around and like tip my sword to everyone. Hello, right. Fighting Irish fan. Tip of the sword. Hello, Nittany Lion fan. Tip of the sword. Be handed out swords to everybody, right? Xavier Watts, do you want to hold my sword? Nick Singleton, do you want to hold my sword? Right? Like, as opposed to slaying bulldogs.
Yeah, I think you don't need it for the North versus North, or you at least need like a different like you need like a ceremonial sword, maybe. So maybe you need to get a third sword in the mix, one
Not
that
a
travels to
sword.
only. Not a battle sword, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, I'm going to put. I don't want to let them go, but I got to put them down to do the show.
Okay.
But God, they feel good. Did you catch? So, welcome to our audience. We're so glad to be with you. We have giant shows all week. I'm flying to Miami today, but my flight just got rebooked because it's snowing in Columbus, Ohio. So we'll see what happens. Did you catch the post-game show? God, we have a great breakdown of how these 4 semifinal teams, how their rosters were built. We have that. We have how the North has dominated bowl season, and we have the Cram-o-Meter. So we got a lot for you. Did you catch the Notre Dame post-game show at all?
I did. I was watching it from the Phoenix airport where my flight was in the process of being delayed like 4 hours. Okay.
Let me just catch people up real quick. It was like a 27-minute show. It was just me in the Superdome. If you missed it, this is how it went. I'm so happy that Notre Dame won. It was like that. I don't know what happened. Long week.
That's not why you weren't crying because Notre Dame won.
I'm so happy. Marcus Freeman's such a good guy. He is a good guy. I'm happy Notre Dame won. You don't have to cry about it. Long week. Emotional day. I didn't necessarily realize it until it happened. And still hearts and thoughts with everybody in New Orleans. They were a great host city. There are tremendous people down there. And it was an honor to be there and be part of it. And I guess they didn't show it on the TV maybe, but I do want to say, like, anthem singer just absolutely nailed it that day. I believe her name is Samira. Tremendous job that day. So anyway, now we're back to swords. Are you aware of how well we're starting with overall vibes before we get into the rosters? Do you know are you aware of the fact that the North is just absolutely slapping the South around every time they meet each other in the postseason?
I'm pretty aware of it. Yeah. I would be lying if I said I've been locked in on all the bowl games because it was hard to be when I was in Los Angeles. But I was aware of what was happening. I got the taste of Burt. I saw that. Was certainly aware of what Michigan was doing to Alabama without, its dozen or so best players. That was pretty fun. But I don't know the overall. I don't know the exact numbers.
So let's do this. So we just want to give a shout out and we want to celebrate all of our great fan bases having a fantastic postseason. We have 28 teams that we cover as our primary Northern P4 teams. We, of course, acknowledge everybody else. We acknowledge everybody in the MAC. We acknowledge Boise State, right? All these teams. But we just acknowledge that we are a power conference focused show with our Northern loyalties. So we have 28 teams that we have claimed as our own. 20 of those 28 made the postseason. 11 of those 20 won in the postseason. Overall, our 28 teams, those 20 teams are 14-9 in the postseason. But that is because Notre Dame, Penn State, and Ohio State all won twice. Okay. So Ben's asking, could Kentucky or Louisville be in the North? Kentucky, no, because they've thrown in with the SEC. If you're in a conference that starts with the word South, you can't be part of Kings of the North. Louisville and Virginia Tech are our border teams. I could imagine a scenario, maybe someday, Bill, like you got Brom down there. Like Brom, he's got some Brommy Brom. Like we'll see. We'll see. We've had quite a conflict about that, but they don't count right now. So of the 9 losses, of the 9 losses that our team suffered in the postseason, 5 of the 9 were to each other. Indiana lost to Notre Dame in the playoff. Oregon lost to Ohio State in the playoff. Boston College lost to Nebraska. Colorado lost to BYU. And Rutgers lost to Kansas State. So we had to lose at least 5, right? So it's like, okay, we're 14-9, but it's like, well, I don't know what to tell you. Like, there's nothing you could do there, right? The other 4 losses by our teams in postseason, Iowa lost to Missouri by 3. Pitt lost to a northern team, a northern MAC team in Toledo in overtime, playing a walk-on and a freshman at quarterback and balling out. That was the day after Christmas. That was a fun game, man. I don't think Pitt should be walking, right? They played Eli Holstein or Nate Yarnell all year. I don't think that was like a hang your head. That was a fun game. Pitt did everything they could. And then, by the way, since then, and that's not what we're doing today, a whole bunch of Pitt guys said they're staying for next year, which is great. So I didn't think that was I mean, it's one of those things. I'm sure West Virginia fans are making fun of Pitt or whatever, but like, I know they finished the season with 6 straight losses after starting. Yeah, you tilted your head after starting.
It's a MAC team. No offense,
but
it's also a MAC team.
Yeah, but without their quarterback.
Sure.
But we also claim victory. Congratulations.
I don't think you should count northern losses to northern teams as losses on the overall record.
No, I know. I agree. So I'm trying to. I already on this very show, not this very show, but on this earlier this year, I digitally handed Jason Candle a sword. So congrats to Toledo for that win to the Rockets. All right. West Virginia lost to Memphis without their coach. I don't know. When your coach gets fired and you're still in a bowl, like all bets are off, and it was a close game. They only lost by 5. Washington lost to Louisville, and again, that's not a South win. That's a border win. Louisville's a border school. Washington lost by 1 because they went for 2 at the end of the game because Jed Fish is like, let's go. And Damon Williams Jr. gave us a taste of the future, man. That's not a bad loss by Washington, right? That's a fun game.
It's a fun game. And I just want to see Damon Williams ball out. That's all that matters. I'm like, independent of the result.
Yeah. So, like, this... No, Aaron says this channel defines the North as Ohio State. I don't think we do that, Bill. Do you think we're too Ohio State heavy?
No,
I don't think so either. I'm like, what can we talk about? Wait till we go down and own the Orange Bowl. Holy moly. I can't wait, brother. You're going to be knee deep in snow in Dallas, and I'm going to be on the beach. I'm sending pictures. I'm putting pictures on Instagram.
Yeah, the North is coming to North Texas with me. It sounds like.
Yeah,
I'm a little nervous about it. If I'm being honest, I don't know what to expect.
Yeah. Look at Aaron. Why Aaron's grumpy today? Why is Aaron grumpy about the fact that we started off covering Ohio State, but now we celebrate the North? So they're 14-9 overall. That includes like Minnesota over Virginia Tech. Great win, right? Mm-hmm. I love the Minnesota season all the way through. And I just saw a headline. I haven't had a chance to read it by our friend Ryan Burns, who does a great job covering Minnesota, about how Max Brosmer has been hanging out with Drake Lindsay all year, the 1-year transfer quarterback, helping the young quarterback get ready for what's next, which is just like exactly what we want in a quarterback room. And then PJ Fleck took that Mayo like a champ, brother.
He sure did.
I loved everything. I loved everything about this Minnesota season. It started with that disappointing loss to North Carolina that was right there. They had the tough loss against Michigan on the onside kick kind of thing, but I really thought they fought and had a plan and really like sort of reestablished who they are this whole season. Great bowl win by Minnesota, and Virginia Tech was kind of like what you don't want to be in bowl season.
No, I like Minnesota season a lot. Like that was, I don't know. Like part of it is some of the games they lost, like they maybe should have won, and the season could have been a little better, I guess. But overall, what you wanted to see was like a step back in the winning direction from last year, and this was certainly that. And I was a little nervous that PJ Fleck was going to like try to weasel his way out of the Mayo bath, and he didn't do it. So I was happy to see.
Yeah,
that.
I would have weaseled my way out of it. I think I would have had to either quit or throw the game.
Listen, I enjoy mayo on my sandwich. I in fact like Duke's mayo quite a bit. I don't want to get doused with it.
No, I don't eat mayo. I don't know, like, what would happen if they dumped mayo on your head and then you just profusely vomited? Would that be, is that cool? If it was like, I hate this, I'm sorry, I didn't know that I was going to play in this bowl game sponsored by your product. It's nothing personal. When I started my coaching career, this was not part of the plan, but here I am. I guess I'm going to do it, but I hate mayonnaise, and I promise you I'm going to puke. Would they embrace that as like, hey, like a Pop-Tart's kind of, hey, because like who doesn't like a Pop-Tart? But like, I don't know if that would have been viral or not in a bad way. Anyway, good job by Minnesota. They did not throw that game. They won. Syracuse over Washington State. That's a great win. Just Syracuse chucking all over the place. And again, we're still trying to figure out if Kyle McCord is going to be able to play for another year. Like, what a year for Syracuse. What a year.
Great year for Fran Brown and the boys. Yeah. And do you want what would you want to see Kyle McCord back? Would you prefer to see Kyle McCord back? You want to see him throw another 600 passes next year?
So this is not the time to have this conversation. Every time that you have a player stick around, like there was the Miami guy who played 9 years, right? Who just ended his career and played 9 years. And some people thought that was cool. I did not think that was cool, because every person who is nearing their 30s and is in year 6 and 7 and 8 and 9 of college football is taking away an opportunity from somebody in year 2 or year 3 or year 4, a teenager or an early 20-something who is waiting for their turn. And so I don't think we want to turn this sport into a sport played by 25 and 26-year-olds in year 7. I don't like this junior college thing that Diego Pavia fought for, like, and that has been granted so far, that junior college eligibility now does not count against your eligibility, at least for the moment. I think is weird, because I do think it matters. There's like a system to how this sport works. And so this is just another thing that college football is going to have to work out. I do not necessarily think it's supremely cool for a guy to be like, hey, like Cam Rising coming back for year 8 at Utah. Like, I don't think that's cool. I think it's time for somebody else to have a chance to be Utah's quarterback. Kyle McCord is obviously not at that point, and we've discussed this a little bit, that he had a red shirt that was lost on 11 extra plays or something. So I, in that situation, would like to see Kyle McCord back, but I am very nervous about this trend toward never-ending eligibility for some people. Like at some point, and I don't know what it is. I don't know if there's an age cap that you need to put on it. If we just decide you get 5 and that's it, in any way, shape, or form, it's 5 and we're done. The COVID stuff started this, but it's headed toward a weird spot, I think.
Yeah, the COVID stuff did start it, and I think that'll start to dissipate a little bit after this year.
Yeah,
I think the days of like the 7-8 years of college careers are more or less over after this year. But I think I am in favor of I saw a couple of national writers reporting that the NCAA was considering just doing a blanket, you get 5 years no matter what. I think I'd be okay with that. But I'm wondering, like, if that were to pass like sometime in the next 3 weeks, 4 weeks, would that apply to Kyle McCord and then play next year?
Right. That's interesting. Yeah. So we have to understand, we need a little grace with all of this, because the sport is changing so much in a million different ways. And I am sympathetic to individual players who are seeking help for something that they maybe think was unfair, but you have to realize there's always an effect on the other end. And there was an effect with the COVID stuff. You know, there's a group of college football players, and then you have movement, so you can go somewhere else. And so if someone stuck around for a 6th or 7th year at your school, now you can transfer and find an opportunity to play. I get it, but it's not all good. There are people who are, quote, harmed by it when somebody gets year 7, year 8. This doesn't count. This doesn't count. Keep playing, right? There's some harm.
Yeah, I think so. I think it like, because a lot of times too, if you're hanging around that long, like you're not that good. Like, yeah, I think it harms the product too. Like it stunts opportunities for people who I think deserve it, but also, like, don't you want your product to be the best it could be? And like letting people hang around for 9 years, I don't think gets you there.
Although super weird, and like I actually like this swing towards this. Like if NFL teams is with some of these quarterbacks, like, well, we want you now to have experience, because it used to be like, oh, we want to draft third-year guys so we can draft you when you're 20, so you can have no idea what you're doing, and then get here. But then we're gonna have you on your third contract. You'll only be 34, whatever. It's like, well, nobody got to their third contract. Sam Darnold came out super young, with very little experience. And the Jets got nothing out of that. He's good now, but he's only 25. He's been in the league like 6 years.
Yeah.
But he's only 25, but it didn't help the team that drafted him at all. So it's like, why? So now they're drafting Bo Nix and Michael Penix. Did you watch Michael Penix? My goodness. Michael Penix is ready for this.
Looks pretty good. Yeah, it looks pretty good.
I watched like the whole Michael Penix, Bryce Young thing. That's one of those things, sometimes from college perspective, it's like, that was the Heisman winner versus the number 2 Heisman guy in different years. I was like, I am all about this game. I don't care about it. I want to watch Bryce Young and Michael Penix from college football perspective.
I watched Tanner McKee and Drew Lock.
Look at you. Who's Tanner McKee? Oh, you watched the Birds. Sorry. Yeah. Your son just had a birthday. You didn't get him a Tanner McKee jersey, did he? Did you?
No.
Okay. 11-4 versus the South in postseason play. Now, this is taking all things into account. This is including Navy over Oklahoma. This is including Army over Louisiana Tech. This is including UConn over North Carolina, in addition to all the other ones we know about. 11-4. 11-4. 11-4. What do you think of that?
That's good, right? That's good, right? I just want to check. Did you see Brett Bielema? I think it was today. NBC Sports tweeted like a graphic about the Big Ten versus the SEC in postseason play, and what I think it's 4-1. And then Brett Bielema like quote tweeted it and said, like, this is awesome. How come the Big Ten network's not out there promoting this kind of stuff?
We got to get him on.
Sports. It was NBC Sports who did it.
We're going. We're promoting it with swords, because overall P4 versus P4, which includes SEC versus Big Ten. P4 versus P4. 6-1. 6-1 in the postseason. Penn State over SMU in the playoff. Woo! Ohio State over Tennessee in the playoff. Notre Dame over Georgia in the playoff. Iowa State over Miami when the Miami quarterback stopped playing at halftime, which is fine. I'm not going to have a 45-minute conversation about whether Cam Ward should have played in the second half or shouldn't have played in the first half, but like that's an 11-win Iowa State season. I don't know what else to tell you about that. You okay with that? You okay with an 11-win Iowa State season?
I am okay with that.
It just feels good in your hand, you know? Michigan over Alabama. Mama, Sita, Michigan over Alabama. Illinois over South Carolina. And then the only loss is Missouri over Iowa. And that was like a 3-point game. So I'm not going to be mad at Iowa. They did what they could. I'm not going to be mad that we didn't go 7-0. But we went 6-1. I'm not going
to be mad at Iowa. They don't know who their quarterback is. You can't be mad at Iowa.
So we did not super cover the Michigan win. I just want to, I think people know this. By the way, we're going to get Tony Petitti on the show. We're going to get Tony Petitti on the show live from a site at some point, I think. No, I didn't think. They don't know that. But like, we know that. We're going to get him. And we're going to tell him that he needs us. Do you think he needs us? Does Brett Bielema need us? Does the North, they're searching for this. You see people reaching out and they just don't know that we're already here.
Yeah, I think he needs us. And he also needs a kick in the pants. And we can give it to him.
Yeah. All right. Kick that man in the pants in a friendly way, in a friendly northern way.
That's right.
This Alabama win over Michigan. So just to double check, and again, it's not like this is news, but we have not supremely covered it. It's for our guy, John. So Michigan simultaneously, and it's not avenged. It's like, what do you call a thing when instead of someone getting revenge on you, you don't allow them to get revenge? They unvenged. They simultaneously unvenged both their playoff games from last year, because they beat Alabama again, and then they beat Kalen DeBoer, who was the Washington coach last year and is now the Alabama coach, again. They unvenged both teams they beat last year in a single game. Michigan's end of the season is wild. Double checked. You know I like the top 30. I extended it to top 32 for this because there were just a couple guys right on the edge. Michigan was missing 11 of its top 32 guys in that game based on snaps played this season. Alabama was only missing 7 of their top 32. And they had their whole offense. And really, kind of like the most important guy in the Alabama offense didn't play. Who didn't play? You know how he didn't play? Because he's transferring to Michigan. Hey, guys, we got everybody except that guy who's actually transferring to the team we're playing. So that's Justice Haynes. And then they missed like 2 guys that kind of mattered. Maybe 3 guys that mattered on defense, right? Alabama missed. One of them was Keon Sabb. I don't even know why he didn't play, but he's a former Michigan guy who transferred from Michigan to Alabama. They missed 2 other guys. They missed Devontae Smith, who's transferring to Notre Dame, and they missed Damon Payne Jr., who's also transferring to Michigan. So, like, I don't know. It's one of those things. Do you want? And then Michigan arguably played without. I mean, not arguably played without like its 4 most important offensive players and its 5 most important defensive players, and won anyway. And so I can't. Like, it is wild. Who would you rather be right now going into next year, Alabama or Michigan?
Michigan.
Mike, can you go solo on me real quick? Just one shot. So, Sabb was hurt. Aaron Taylor. Thank you for Aaron. These are all the Northern teams that won bowl games. That's who gets the banners today, who won postseason games. So I'm going to be like a weatherman and point to stuff. We got, this is really hard. Wait, where am I? Oh, so we got Penn State and Notre Dame on the upper thing because they're going to get plenty of attention later. We got Nebraska, Kansas State, and Ohio State, and then Iowa State, Illinois, BYU, Michigan, Minnesota, and Syracuse. Everybody gets credit. Congratulations on your postseason. Like, unbelievable. Like, I think a great postseason. I'd rather be Michigan too. I haven't been totally aware of everything, but I know our guy Ari Wasserman wrote the thing that was like Kalen DeBoer did exactly what he needed to do. I assume it's just recruiting related because Alabama had a good class.
It was, yeah. Because I was wondering the same thing. Like, what is this? What
is it? Just for the headline? Wait, Bama's good. So I like Michigan. You compare where they were. Compare where they were in the middle of November. Before Alabama lost to Oklahoma and Alabama looked like it was heading to the playoff, and when Michigan was 5-5 and didn't have Bryce Underwood, and then Michigan won its last 3 and got Bryce Underwood, and Alabama fell off a cliff, blew the playoff spot, and now lost in the bowl game 2 straight years to Michigan. Like, are we? I'm very confused. I think people are trying still. People all year tried to imagine the SEC being something they weren't. I think people are still doing it with Alabama. Because the thing about Alabama, and this is not the last time we'll talk about this year, the aura has been punctured. So now they're just a team. And now they're just a team that like had a bunch of goofy losses and looked bad in its bowl game, and their quarterback went to the NFL and a bunch of guys are transferring. And it's like, why? What is there other than the uniforms that people are like, oh, Bama's in good shape? I think that's nuts.
I think they're waiting for the statue of Nick Saban outside of the stadium to come to life and start coaching the team again. And that's what they're holding on to. Yeah.
Maybe he'll come back like Bill Snyder came back. Like Saban will be like, all right, I can't watch this. I think it's so weird.
Maybe a non-zero chance. that
happen. Yeah. So, Aaron says if Michigan had a balanced offense, it would have been a blowout too. I mean, this is a conversation. I have a friend who's a Michigan fan, and when we text sometimes, again, it's a reminder that the Michigan quarterback situation was so egregious, and we don't have to relitigate that. We know why it happened, but there was a team in there. You know, there were, and especially then to think about that they lost Will Johnson, who's going to be a top 5 pick. Again, this is not what we're doing on this show, but you go through. I did it the other day. Projected first round on whoever I found. I think it might have been PFF. Projected first round is like 15 north, 15 south, and 2 border. Like you go through and it's like Will Johnson and Mason Graham are both top 10 picks. Travis Hunter, Shadur Sanders. Like, again, this talent, the talent balance in Michigan. There was a version of Michigan in there for anybody who, when we talked about to various degrees in the preseason, could Michigan be a playoff team? I mean, I think there were things there in the end that was why some people talked about it that way. We talked about it as a possibility, and then it's just quarterback prevented it from happening. That and some injuries.
I think they were like I would say quarterback, offensive coordinator, and maybe an offensive line piece or 2 away from.
Yeah,
I think being right in the thick of it. Defense clearly was everything it needed to be, and a run and like Donovan Edwards, Khalil Mullings, and it turns out Jordan Marshall too. If he had been a part of the offense, I think we're ready to roll. Which is quarterback got screwy.
And again, I just think like if there can't be anybody who would be questioning Sherrone Moore right now, but thinking like, oh, Kalen DeBoer, he's got this. Like, because maybe in the middle of the year, if you're like, oh man, Sherrone Moore kind of didn't like, but then he decisively changed offensive coordinator the day the season ended. They figured out Bryce Underwood. They rallied and beat Ohio State and Alabama to end the season, and then made you realize how good this defense was. And meanwhile, the Bama aura is gone. Kalen DeBoer lost it in a year. It's gone. And so I just find it odd. Is anybody writing stories that was like, hey, Sherrone Moore, watch out. He did a great, like they should be. I actually think that's reasonable. Like Sherrone Moore kind of held it together and then finished the year with three giant wins, 2 on the field and 1 on the recruiting trail. But I'm supposed to kiss Kalen DeBoer's tuchus? I don't get it. I don't want to.
You don't have to. Don't let Ari make
I'm not gonna do it. I'm not gonna do it. Do you want to do the Cram-o-Meter?
Yeah, let's do it.
The South has given up.
Yeah.
So I do want to say something off the top.
Again.
Kirby Smart's father passed away. Apparently, I guess he fell in New Orleans, and then that led to a series of health things that led to his unfortunate passing. So thoughts with Kirby Smart. As I said on that post game when I was in tears the whole time, I thought like Kirby Smart, you could see walking off the field. I think it was an emotional week for everybody down there, especially so for Kirby Smart as he was dealing with this stuff. He was there with his guys. He was waiting for his veterans to walk off the field. He was there with them. He was very gracious with Marcus Freeman. He was very gracious with Riley Leonard. So we have a lot of fun with dog mentality and that kind of thing. But really tough week for Georgia. And I thought they handled a lot of that stuff with class. And again, thoughts and prayers to Kirby Smart and his family. But the other thing that has happened since then, Bill, and it's hard for me because I live in a bubble a little bit. I live in a northern bubble here in my little office. It was so good to get back. God, this grip. You felt my swords before, right?
They're heavy. Yeah.
My God, they feel good. I don't want to leave it. I feel like everybody after Notre Dame beat Georgia is now saying the things that we've been saying for 6 months. And it's weird to me that for some people, it is like a reaction to something. To us, it's like, yeah. Well, I don't know. Like, what are you talking about? Yeah, no, I know. Yeah, there's 3 Northern teams in, and Texas probably shouldn't even be there, and it should be a desert team and 3 Northern teams. Yeah, I know. And the SEC was overrated. Now you're realizing it? Yeah, I know. What? Like, do you feel that at all?
I don't even know if people have yet to like really process what's happened. We've been processing it since last year, but we were fully processed. No more processing happening over here. But I think the college football apparatus is still wrapping its mind around its new reality.
Yeah. People are in here being grumpy. Why are people in here being grumpy? The new reality like is here with a force, right? Like it is here. And it's undeniable now. So I think that's factoring into our Cram-o-Meter in some way that the North reached the point is that there's almost no, it'll be an interesting offseason. Mm-hmm. And again, our point here has never really been the North is better than the South. It's just that the South is not better than the North. And I just don't know who can be hanging on to that anymore. And Feinbaum saying, I was pushing for Alabama to make the playoff and I give up. I surrender on that. You go through again. I was just looking at some stuff. A lot of people picked Georgia to win the national championship. And Ari was tweeting during the game, like anybody who picked Georgia to win the national championship was like holding on to a past of Georgia that was never true this year. And like I read that and I was like, I know. And I tweeted Ari, it's like, just tag Andy Staples already. Tag Josh Pate, Ralph Russo from The Athletic, picked Georgia. Like tag them. But we thought that the whole time. You're hanging on to something that doesn't exist, and you're closing your eyes to something in the North that you are pretending doesn't exist. But both are happening simultaneously, and that's the magical thing about this season, Bill, is that the North rose up, which we've said a million times, at the exact same time the South fell down, and that's how we got here. Because I don't think it could only be the North rising up. Saban retiring, Georgia having issues, a lot of the other Southern teams not being what people thought they were going to be, whether that was LSU or Texas A&M or Ole Miss or Miami or teams like that, losing goofy games that teams in the North didn't lose.
Clemson falling off a little bit, Florida State not sustaining. Yeah, there's a lot there.
So it's odd. Like, it's odd to me to be part of a new reality that I feel like this show has been part of since August, that this season has definitively reached. I think it's going to affect. I don't know if we'll do as much shouting next season, because I don't know if there'll be as much puffery from the South, because
they'll be puffery.
Okay.
They'll be puffery.
I feel all right. I'm not going to give my swords away. I was like, you know
they'll
what?
Be
Maybe
puffery. January 21st is when the puffery will start.
Okay, and really, don't you like in the end, Texas? Would you say Texas should have lost, or just that Texas easily
State?
Could have lost? Yeah.
I mean, what was it? 4th and 10, 4th and 11, something like that, and they scored that touchdown in overtime. Yeah, I think they should have lost.
Yeah. JJ says the fall of the SEC started with the rise of NIL and the transfer portal, which like we were saying in April. And again, like if you had your eyes closed to that, I don't know what to tell you. How much you cramming it?
I don't know that I'm cramming it. I might be a zero. I might be like a zero.
Maybe we back it off. All right. Let's remind people the Cram-o-Meter. We didn't do it week 1 because I'm terrible at my job and we forgot to do it. Week 2, we said it was going to be 1 to 1,000. Week 2, we were already at 815. Week 3 at 975. Week 4 at 910. Week 5, we broke it for the first time, 1,200. Week 6, over 1,600. Week 7, we really smashed it, 6.5 million. Week 8, 459,000. Week 9, we backed off, back under 1,000, 652. Week 10, 45,000. Week 11, over 1 million. Week 12, 250,000. Week 13, 1.85 million. Week 14, our favorite week of the year, Brett Bielema is head. You got to get the guy on. Week 15, 26.65 million. Week 16, 500 million. And then week 17, last week we were down there. We said, we're just all people, 23. Mm-hmm. My daughter did not like that. So she wants me, I might have to cram more for my daughter. My daughter doesn't like, we get it. All right. You can acknowledge that we're all people and also cram it, I think. But so you're saying, why are you so relaxed about the cram? Because there's nothing left to cram? Because all the cramming's been done?
Yeah, well, I guess there's still one team left, so I guess all the cramming's not totally done. Texas remains alive, but it's just like I don't. Do you like to kick somebody when they're down? I don't like. I don't necessarily. That's just not how I live my life. I just like to acknowledge that they're down, and then I think the fact that like you're down, and I even no longer consider you for crammage is an insult greater than getting crammed on 1.2 billion.
Wow. You've known me for a while. I mean, kicking people when they're down is my favorite time to kick people, because when they're up, they might kick you back. Like, oh, you're down again. This is UFC. This is not boxing. They're down. I'm jumping on their face.
In the chat, Zephead says, "Cram job's not finished. Kobe Bryant style, job's not finished." I respect that. All right, 1 billion.
Okay, because I think we could go either way with it. It's either like over the top more than it's ever been because we're cramming them when they're down, or it's 0 because there's no need to cram anymore. But the cram job's not finished. I'll also say 1 billion so that we will be at a full billion on the list. Like, cram jobs not finished. And then maybe, right, it'll be like a star and it'll flame out and disappear and it'll be a black hole. We've crammed it to as much as cramming can be. The star dies, creates a black hole that sucks in the entire SEC, and then we're done. And then we're just here and there's no more cramming. Maybe we retire the Cram-o-Meter.
I do love the suggestions of either Shane Beamer's screaming face or just Shane Beamer's salary. Both great suggestions.
Yeah. My God. But do you think, I mean, everybody is always on alert, much more with the North, about how things that happen one year will affect things the next year. So that was primarily about how are you going to view in the first round of the playoffs? How are you going to view a team like Indiana that doesn't have any great wins and is 11-1? Should they even be in here? Don't you think this has to somewhat affect the dialogue next year when the SEC is going to be claiming all of our teams are like our third and fourth and fifth and sixth teams. The schedule's so hard. Doesn't that have to change after you watch Illinois? The amount of dialogue around Illinois as a playoff contender compared to the amount of dialogue around South Carolina, Ole Miss, and Alabama as a playoff contender wasn't even comparable because there was none around Illinois. But then Illinois beat South Carolina. So I don't know is that going to change things?
I don't know. I mean, I hope so. I hope it does. I'm not super confident that it will. Because I don't know you can break that spell in 1 year. Even as much as this one is smack you in the face with a pretty harsh dose of reality. I don't know. I think it takes longer than 1 year for the new reality to totally set in. If people really start thinking about the sport differently. So I think it's going to take some time.
Yeah, J.C. Davis staying in Illinois, that was a big deal. Kept the left tackle.
Yeah, love that.
There's a lot of actually like some pretty good stuff happening with Northern teams in terms of keeping some guys around. And I just think you can see the North like falling into line, right? Like all the things that we talked about. There's a lot of things, both West Virginia and Purdue are sort of pursuing the Kurt Cignetti model where you can see the Jacksonville State guys following Rich Rodriguez to West Virginia. You can see the UNLV guys following Barry Odom to Purdue, like some of that bring in the best of what you have and like reinvigorate. I think those programs could be reinvigorated, not to the Indiana level, but reinvigorated very quickly. And I think you see a lot of the North doing good work in the portal. We've done a portal show, Bill, but I mean, it's not just as much as, of course, we're going to talk about the playoff this week and the semifinalists, our three semifinalists. It's not just them. It's not just them. I really do think you can see these teams doing work.
Yeah, you can. No, that's what it was going to have to be. Like, it wasn't Notre Dame, Penn State, Ohio State, Oregons of the world, Michigan's like we knew they were going to be good. We knew they were going to be mainstays and important to the national conversation. It's can Illinois rise? Can Indiana rise? Can West Virginia like that? That's what makes the difference, I think, because like the argument, the thing that like the Southern football argument tended to fall back on, at least in my estimation, was like not so much what the top end was, because although the top end was very good, it was the depth. It was that the number 8. In the SEC would be number 2 in the Big Ten kind of conversation. So that's where there was work to be done, and it seems like it's happening.
Yeah, and I do think just like some of the things, the way I think Syracuse, BYU, Illinois, Iowa State, the way they were perceived during the year, not as part of the conversation with some of the SEC teams, the way they finished, I think proves some things, and I do think we'll look at teams like that. We should, and I think even us, I certainly we were not out here like banging the drum. Why is BYU not in the playoff conversation after they didn't make the Big 12 title game? But now in retrospect, I'm like, man, maybe that really should have been something that was much more a discussion than it was because you saw how good they are.
You saw how good, yeah, but. We want to be taken seriously as ball knowers too, don't we? Like,
I know we do.
We don't need to lower and debase ourselves, clamoring for teams to get into the playoffs that they clearly don't belong in the conversation, right? We'll see if that the South can do that.
That's what a man would say when he just told the South to cram it $1 billion. We don't need to lower and debase ourselves like they do down there. Okay, we have a playoff. Just a thing I want to rant about with the playoff a little bit, and then we're going to get into how these programs were truly built, how these 4 semifinal teams, I did some research on their rosters. I think there's a little bit of just like a headline thing with Notre Dame that got some people angry. By the way, I also want to have Bill check in on what he thought of the Fighting Irish in the Sugar Bowl. We'll do all of that next on Kings of the North. Doug Lesmerises, Bill Landis back on KOTN. Thanks for being on this ride with us. It has been a fantastic one. We just continue to be grateful that we're able to do this and that you guys are here with us, whether you've been in from the jump or whether you're finding us for the first time today. We want to celebrate, contextualize, have fun with Northern College football, and what Northern College football has given us this year in terms of stuff to talk about is wild, Landis. Wild. What if we were staring at no Northern teams in the semis? What would we be doing?
Really talking more about Michigan beating Alabama.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Real. We're doing all Michigan shows. All right. So I feel like I just want to do this quickly. I feel like people are offering hot takes on like the seeding of the playoff needs to change. And I just don't think it's a hot take situation. I think it's like a duh take situation.
Yeah.
Okay.
But to say like thing that's definitely going to happen should happen. Yeah. Okay. Great.
Yeah. So I don't, it's such low hanging fruit. So I just want to cover 3 parts of sort of like what happened in the playoff this year, why it happened, and why it's going to change. And of course it matters, but I also just think like we have to understand like why we're at this spot. So there are sort of 3 key things to how we got to this. It's a 12-team playoff, 4 buys for conference winners, all that kind of stuff. Okay, the first thing was this. That when they agreed to the 12-team playoff with buys for the 4 best conference champs, that was in September of 2022. At that point, we knew that USC and UCLA were going to the Big Ten, and we knew that Texas and Oklahoma were going to the SEC, but we didn't think it was happening. The SEC stuff we didn't think was happening this season. You have to remember that at that point, Texas and Oklahoma were going to go to the SEC in 2025. So this was going to sort of be a transitional, transformational year, some of the new, some of the old. So Texas and Oklahoma should still be in the SEC. And this was before Oregon and Washington were leaving the Pac-12 and the Pac-12 was dying. So all we thought for 2024, when they created the 12-team playoff with these 4 buys, the only thing that we knew was going to happen, we thought, was USC and UCLA to the Big Ten. And that's not transformational enough to make you think, holy moly, we shouldn't do this, right? So I think that's very important that they decided this while the sport was in flux, but Oregon, Washington, Texas, and Oklahoma were still supposed to be in their old places this year. I just want people to know we're not the first people to bring that up, but I just want to make sure people know that, Bill.
I forgot it. So I was glad. I was glad that you brought it up and reminded me that how much the sport changed almost immediately after they set the structure.
Yeah. So that's point number 1. Point number 2, and like Dan Wetzel has talked about this on the show with us a lot, like it doesn't really make sense to change something before you tried it. And I think if they had announced something and it was like, hey, look, we're like giving respect to conferences besides the SEC and the Big Ten. Look, we're giving them buys. If they had changed that before we had ever done it, I think people would have gone nuts. More nuts than people are going that Arizona State and Boise State got buys this year. It would have been like, oh my God, look at the SEC and the Big Ten throwing their weight around. The little guy is dead. How do they ever have a chance? We're just going to have Big Ten and SEC teams getting buys. This is ridiculous. So I think once they announced it, when the changes happened that I think made you think, oh, okay, I don't know about this. You couldn't change it before it happened. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think the fact that they didn't now will build I think clearly has built like a stronger coalition to change it moving forward, which I'm totally fine with. But no, I think I even thought that when they said like, oh, we're doing a 12-team playoff, and by the way, it's going to be 14 soon. It's like, can we do 12 first to see what this looks like before we decide we're going to move to 14? So it's the same thought process. So yeah, I'm in favor of you don't have to change it before you try it. Now that we've tried it, you can change it.
And then we're clearly going to get to 14 sooner than later. And they're clearly going to make it that it's not that you have to have the conference champs get in, but it's not going to be that those are the guaranteed top 4 seats. Like there's just, of course that's going to happen. Of course it is. But the real thing that happened here, that's like when people talk about Oregon getting screwed, the thing that actually really screwed Oregon was Ohio State losing to Michigan. And that's ball. And we have to be on alert for that. The real issue that has a lot of people because that's like I think Joel Klatt's very big on the Oregon got screwed. What they got screwed by is by an excellent team losing a game they never should have lost and being an 8 seed. And now again, if you want to talk about, well, should Ohio State or Penn State have been the 8 seed or whatever? Like, I don't know. They're trying, but that's what screwed it up, Landis. And I think I just want to make sure like we're not underselling that, because it threw off our view of Ohio State, but it also made Ohio State a much lower seed than they ever should have been based on their talent and potential. And Oregon was the one who had to deal with that.
I think that's right, but I also think the playoff committee could have very easily put Ohio State ahead of Penn State. I still think they should have, because Ohio State beat Penn State on the field and they had the same number of losses. So, like, yes, you're right. The Ohio State loss to Michigan complicated things, and that's maybe what screwed the thing up more than anything else. But there was still a very logical pathway to the committee putting Ohio State ahead of Penn State that would have avoided that game too. That Oregon Ohio State, that quarterfinal game too. So, like, I don't want to like absolve the committee of like all wrongdoing in that situation because their hands were tied by the Michigan loss. Like, they still created a field that they didn't have to create.
But like, even Kirby Smart, after that loss, people were asking, and there's like a rust versus rest, right? I mean, I was asking about rust versus rest for 3 weeks, and there's a rust versus rest conversation that's happening now because everybody that rested lost. So they rusted. The rest rusted them. But I actually don't think that's why they lost. So it's what's the thing? Like it's coincidence, but not causation or whatever. I don't know what it's called. There's some science person.
Does not equal something. Another Asian.
Yeah. Look at this. Look at us just putting science into football.
Correlation.
So there we go. So that will be like, here's, let's just run through. I just did it very, very quickly. If Ohio State beats Michigan, okay, based on what we know now, you get Ohio State, Oregon in the Big Ten championship game. Let's assume that Ohio State would have beaten Oregon because then they beat them when they played. Okay. So in that scenario, here's what your seeds would have been. Ohio State 1, Georgia 2, Boise 3, Arizona State 4, Oregon 5, Texas 6, Penn State 7, Notre Dame 8, Tennessee 9, Indiana 10, SMU 11, Clemson 12. And if things would have gone as they did, these would have been the quarterfinals. Number 1, Ohio State versus number 8, Notre Dame. Number 2, Georgia versus number 7, Penn State. Number 3, Boise versus number 6, Texas. Number 4, Arizona State versus number 5, Oregon. Okay? So Notre Dame's a beneficiary here, right? That they maybe wouldn't have had to meet that, but they still had to go beat number 2. Like maybe Notre Dame would have beaten Ohio State. I don't know. And then if you would have gotten what probably you would expect based on how these games did play out, you're looking at semifinals of Ohio State, Oregon, and Penn State, Texas. So we're pretty much where we are, except we got Notre Dame instead of Oregon because like who had to play the Ohio State monster? But it's Ohio State's fault that they are a monster that had 2 losses. So we can get into it a little bit of like, should they have been the 6 or the 7 or the 8, right? But the real issue is that they have a talent of a 1.
Yeah.
But they have the losses of a 6, 7, or 8. And then if you're talking about somebody getting screwed, that's going to happen. Now, if they had been a 6 and it's like, well, they're super talented, they're just playing Boise, then people would have felt like that worked out. But they might have only been a 7, but it's like, that's what's going to happen because that's what this whole system is doing. It's giving super talented teams a second chance. Now, it's not giving them a third chance or a fourth chance, which is why Alabama wasn't in, but it's giving a second chance. And that's going to feel like it's going to throw some stuff off. And I don't want to disappoint people. I just don't think we're ever going to get to the point where you can pick the team you're playing. No sport has ever done that. No sport has ever created a pick the team you're playing. Oh, wait. So like, the screwiest thing that happened is that Ohio State wound up with 2 losses, which forced them to be a lower seed. And I think if Ohio State beats Michigan, I'm not sure there's a whole bunch of complaints about this other world. I really think it's the Ohio State-Oregon game that is the major complaint. And just don't forget Ohio State's role in that.
I think that's a major complaint, but again, I will just reiterate, like I think there needs to be a hard look at how we value the conference championship games too. Like,
And
if,
I
and
don't.
if merely
I
getting
agree.
like Penn State merely getting there by a technicality of an unbalanced schedule left Penn
Yes.
State ahead of Ohio State when I don't think that should have been the case. So you have to have some conversations about that too.
And I do think I almost feel like that is worth like a put it in the bylaws conversation, right? Because I think they were trying to be consistent and trying to do something, and then they sort of boxed themselves in. But I think they need to, maybe they could put in the bylaws, a conference championship loss will not be viewed as a loss during the regular season, the same as a loss during the regular season, but will be factored in, right? There's something, again, I've talked about, like, it's half a loss, right? So if it's a half a loss for Penn State, well, then that drops them behind Ohio State. If it's no loss, then it's, okay, we can't move you. Like they said, we're not going to move you, was probably the fault there. So anyway, okay. Is that, there's no hot take. There's nothing hot in there. That's as cool. It says cool take. We're going to have cool takes in the North because we're reasonable, and also it's cold and there's snow on the ground. But like, that's right. Cool takes with Bill and Doug.
I like cold takes. We can do a show in an ice bath.
Yeah. Oh, have you ever taken an ice bath?
No.
I've never taken an ice bath and a mayo bath.
Yeah. A cold shower, I think, suffices. I've done that. Like, when you're done your shower, you turn your water all the way down to like ice cold for like a minute, and then you hop out. You get the same, I think, the same effects from that.
Where are you, like, on the Swedish stuff of like super, like the hot sauna, then jump like in the cold pool?
I've never done it, but I like Swedish fish, so maybe I'll try that.
Have an outing.
Yeah.
Have an outing. What did you think of Notre Dame? Since you have not really had the chance to chime in on that yet.
I think the game more or less played out how I was envisioning. I thought it would be a somewhat difficult for Notre Dame to get some consistent offense going, and I thought that was the case. But the thing that surprised me maybe the most is just how much Notre Dame's defensive line controlled things without Riley Mills, and then like Howard Cross gets hurt in the course of that game. But seeing like RJ Oben step up and Junior Tuihalamaka step up, and Gabriel Rubio, right, is the one who started for Riley Mills.
Rubio.
Yeah.
Yes.
First career start, like a pretty interesting story. Was not with the team in the spring. I think he missed the first couple of games of this season because he was hurt, and then he goes out and starts against Georgia in the Sugar Bowl, and I thought played really well in the middle of that Notre Dame defensive line. So that was the story for me. It was I thought like a fairly difficult challenge being laid down for Notre Dame's defensive front in light of all the injuries they faced, and they really rose to the occasion.
So they've missed so many people, but like, just not to, you and I are wrong all the time and stuff, but like, that was a thing you were really worried about, was the interior of Georgia's offensive line against the interior of Notre Dame's defensive line. And it just didn't, that was not what happened. Georgia did not run the ball super effectively, but I just think there's a lot of credit for Notre Dame. Their snap counts in that game. Leonard Moore and Christian Gray didn't come off the field.
Yep.
And Aiden Schuler, so that's their two corners, and Aiden Schuler and Xavier Watts, their two excellent safeties, barely came off the field. And then, so that's 4 spots. The other 7 spots of their defense, they kind of rotated like 14 guys in those 7 spots. Linebacker, edge rusher, like they kept guys fresh. They gave them opportunities. RJ Oben, who had the strip sack at the end of the first half, only played 29 of 64 snaps. But guess what? That helped you be super fresh to go smoke a left tackle at the end of the first half. And I thought 2 things Notre Dame did incredibly well was do that, just play a bunch of guys, even for a team so depleted by injury. And then the other thing that Notre Dame did is they didn't allow Georgia to play the game on Georgia's terms, right? Like they didn't, maybe the thing, because like offensively, they didn't block Georgia great. Like Anthony Knapp is a true freshman at left tackle. There were times he was having a little trouble, but they didn't let that be the deciding factor, because then after the first 2 series, they said, well, let's just make sure we start running Riley Leonard. Right. Yeah. And like Jeremiah Love is dealing with some stuff that's going back a couple games, and he is not all the way there. And he played like 17 snaps. It's our best skill guy. And they worked around that. Like they were able to make the things they did best win the game and not let their vulnerabilities lose them the game. Because guess what? you're maybe not going to block Jalen Walker. But the fact they couldn't block Jalen Walker didn't keep them out of the semifinals, which is great coaching.
Yeah, that was the other part of it too. Was like some of the stuff in the margins where Marcus Freeman was just better than Kirby Smart. Like I wouldn't, and the most obvious one is that fourth down substitution play. But it just felt like Marcus Freeman was and Al Golden too. And I guess Mike Denbrock, I think like figuring it out, and while his offensive line was having some struggles, like Notre Dame's coaching staff outperforming Georgia's coaching staff was not a given Georgia's experience on that stage. And Notre Dame hadn't won a game like this in 30 years or something like that. So that was also impressive. I will also say like I'm coming around a little more on your guy Jordan Faison. Like I didn't know he didn't have a huge game. I think he had 4 catches in that game, but he's got some juice when he gets the ball in his hands. Like that I poo-pooed it when you were talking about him coming out off the Indiana game, but he definitely jumps out to me. I'm worried about Jeremiah Love, like moving forward. We'll preview the Orange Bowl later this week, but I'm worried about. I saw Pete Sampson from the Athletic said that Jeremiah Love was at practice with a knee brace on and like was running with the twos and was limited in the open practice that Notre Dame had on Sunday. So that's worrisome. But Notre Dame's defense, man, like I don't know. I think we gave it like it's due props when we were talking about everything coming into the playoff, but even then, it feels like maybe we sold them a little short of what they were capable of. When we were talking about like how good Texas's defense is and, some of the things about Ohio State and Oregon and Penn State. And like I think we included Notre Dame in that conversation, but maybe we weren't talking about them enough, just how good that, because I was looking through, like on the stat broadcast page, you can go to like that advanced stats section and it gives you the leverage rate, which is like the percentage of your downs where you're basically like in a favorable position. You're not in second and long or third or fourth and long kind of thing. The 4 like lowest leverage rates for any offense in all the playoff games, 2 of them are Indiana against Notre Dame and Georgia against Notre Dame.
Oh, really?
Yeah. The lowest is Boise against Penn State. Second lowest tied are Indiana against Notre Dame and Oregon against Ohio State. And then the third lowest, I guess technically, is Georgia against Notre Dame. So that's just like a defense constantly keeping you in unfavorable situations.
I think we all know exactly what Notre Dame is. This is the whole thing. Like Notre Dame has what it needs, but the reason it has what they are, they have what they need. But the reason those 2 things are true at the same time is because they have a great ability to force the game to be played on their terms. Mm-hmm. And I've been having a lot of Jim Tressel, Marcus Freeman conversations, and I keep saying like I think there's a lot of Mark D'Antonio stuff in there, just like that you're very consistent and you don't make a lot of mistakes, but then you're willing to roll the dice when you need to get over the top. And Riley Leonard threw for like 90 yards, but did exactly what he needed to do basically the entire game. Which is why early I was like, they better start running Riley Leonard. They're like, we got it. We're going to. And it was called runs and scrambles. And Georgia knew it was coming. But the other part of this, too, that I think is interesting from a Georgia perspective is, as people have pointed out, I was very, by the end, by kickoff, I was like, Gunnar Stockton, I don't know, right?
Yeah.
He hit a nice deep ball, but again, sometimes for young quarterbacks, you just drop him back and tell him to drop one in the bucket 50 yards down the field. That's actually not a difficult throw to Mike, but he put it like right on the money. They also had a huge drop, but the drop didn't kill him because they still scored a touchdown on that drive because Gunnar Stockton made another throw. He had another nice couple rips in the middle of the field. I did feel like he didn't feel pressure. Like I think he didn't have a great pocket presence. So I think like even the strip sack at the end is like there are other quarterbacks who would have had a better sense there at the end of the first half. But that's on Kirby and Mike Bobo for calling that.
For calling it. Yeah.
But the point is, Gunnar Stockton was not the worst part of that Georgia loss, which I actually think is bad for Georgia. Because if you're like, hey, man, like our backup quarterback wasn't ready, what are you going to do? And it was like, actually, your backup quarterback kind of did enough for you to win. And here are the other parts. Coaching, special teams, your offensive line got no push and you couldn't run the ball. You don't have skill guys that scare anybody. Like I have like 5 other things that are like, okay, like these are real. Now that they just got the Branch brothers, so that's going to help them. But they're out there like, man, we better get the Branch brothers. Yeah, by the way, they're coming off Bambi. They've been Bambified in Los Angeles for 2 years, so we'll see how good they are. But Like it almost, I think, would be more of a relief to Georgia if just the quarterback lost him the game, as opposed to the quarterback was fine. These 5 other things lost you the game.
Yeah, that's a good point. Like, but none of those 5 other things are surprising, right? Like those. I mean, I know they weren't surprising for you. You've been banging the Georgia's mid drum all year. So I think all those things that you have been passionately revealing, I guess, about Georgia throughout the season, all kind of came to a head in that game. But I actually thought Gunnar Stockton, I was pretty impressed by him, given the circumstances and the magnitude of the game. I thought did he play like absolutely well enough for Georgia to win the game? Maybe a step short of that, but he made some pretty good throws. Like I think in a weird way, you like came away like kind of maybe reassured that he can be your starter next year if you're Georgia, but then you have a whole other slew of issues to figure out around him.
You know who was reassured that he could be Georgia's starter next year? Jaden Rashada, because he went straight into the portal.
Yeah.
Remember when that was a big deal?
Mm-hmm.
Jaden Rashada, Florida to Arizona State to Georgia. Georgia, nope. It's going to be Gunnar Stockton. But also, like he missed some throws. He didn't feel like he handled himself and did well. In that circumstance, he did well. I don't look at Gunnar Stockton and think like, oh man, see him in New York. So
no.
I don't know.
I look at Gunnar Stockton and I see a Georgia quarterback.
There you go. All right. So let's build rosters. You want to build rosters and explain how these teams got to where they are? You're not going to find this anywhere else. All right. All right. We'll do that next on Kings of the North. Doug Lesmerises, Bill Landis, asking in the chat. Someone asked in the chat, has Connor O'Gara from Saturday Down South been back on to say how smart I am? We have not had him on to do that, but I'm sure we'll see him out and about, and we'll have him on to do that then.
I wonder if he'll be in. If he's hanging around in Dallas, maybe I'll try to grab him.
Yeah, that'd be good. So Connor O'Gara, Tony Petiti, Paul Feinbaum. I guess Feinbaum was in New Orleans, but I guess he was in a hermetically sealed bubble because I didn't see him. I guess if you're on ESPN, that you don't have to go hang around with the rest of the media. So you know where I am. Build rosters. There's a headline on ESPN again, not about like transfers help Notre Dame beat Georgia, whatever, that I think like ruffled a couple feathers. Did you see that?
I was again reading an article by Pete Sampson that referenced like how many transfers Notre Dame had hit on, but I don't know that I saw that particular headline.
Okay. So we want to tell you how these teams got here because it was really a conversation last year in the national title game around 2 things primarily. Michigan's ability to keep a lot of very good players on the roster, keep them out of the NFL. But I said all year, Michigan's success is not based on experience. It is based on talent. Yes, they kept guys around, but that's exactly where Ohio State is this year. It's not an experience conversation with Michigan. It's keeping talent out of the NFL for a year. Washington was as old as you'll ever see. Washington was literally the oldest good team we'll ever see. And they were fueled by 5th and 6th and 7th year guys. And that was a huge part of it. So I was adamant last year that whatever experience, they're just old because of COVID, those conversations applied to Washington. Great. Congratulations to Washington. Did not really apply to Michigan. But I think it really got me interested, Landis, in like the roster building of how you get here. So I have like 4 conclusions, and we're going to include Texas in this. 4 conclusions about the keys to the roster building for these 4 teams. But I want to do some comparisons first. The first is I do top 30. It's the most snaps played so far this year. The 30 guys who have played the most snaps, offense or defense, I don't include special teams. And this is just the reality. It's not what you planned. So if you have a really good player who got hurt early and isn't in the top 30 snaps, but he was one of your best, I don't count him because he didn't have as much of an impact because he hasn't played that much. So their own recruits were recruited to their school of the top 30 players, the 4 semifinal teams, Penn State 26, Notre Dame and Texas 24, Ohio State 23. This in a situation where we have seen, for instance, Colorado and Indiana as two teams we've referenced a lot with portal stuff, Bill. A lot of people have. More than half. Indiana and Colorado are more like at 10 or 12 of guys of their top 30 who were recruited. What do you think of these numbers? Penn State, 26 of their top 30 came straight to State College.
I'm not surprised by it. I guess the thing I'm most surprised by is that Ohio State has the fewest. I would have guessed Texas had the fewest. But I don't think any of these 4 programs want to steal a term from Marcus Freeman, the way he's described it, want to major in the transfer portal. They want to minor in it, and major in high school recruiting and development. So I think this will continue to be the case for teams like this. Like I just like not, and that's not to say like there will be years where a team that is constructed primarily out of transfers, I think, does get to this point. But I think the consistent teams in this position will more or less reflect how these teams built their roster. So I'm not surprised to see this.
Okay. Transfers this year. So we added you in the offseason, and you're making an immediate impact for us. In the top 30, Notre Dame 6, Texas and Ohio State 5, Penn State 4. So, of course, this is like at the top of this list is the Notre Dame quarterback and the Ohio State quarterback. So that really matters. You also can include, for instance, Penn State. We're talking about 2 starting corners, and A.J. Harris and Jalen Kimber. Super important. For Notre Dame, R.J. Oben, who had the strip sack, is there because he's a 1-year portal guy, right? There are, and then Ohio State, obviously, Caleb Downs, Quinshon Judkins, Will Kazmarek. We know, right? We understand the targeted nature. But I think the main thing about this, Landis, is it's targeted. It's exactly what you said, minor, not major.
Does Ohio State 5, does that include Seth McLaughlin still, even though he's not playing?
Yes.
Okay. So there's some injured guys in there.
So it's just because he's one of their 30 most snaps, so he was important to their season. So, but does this seem about right to you? Would you imagine that what we are hitting on here is this is the formula? When you are a top team like this, 25 of your top 30, your own guys, maybe 5 guys in the portal that really matter. That's where you're filling holes.
That's the breakdown that I like. I think I've said before. I think I said it on this show that like if you're a team like this and you're getting close to or north of 10 like 1-year first year transfers, so you're banking on making a huge impact for your team, I think you're asking for trouble. And it's not to say that again, like in a 1-year sample size, you can't accomplish it. But if that is your plan, and I'm thinking like an Ole Miss, right? Like Ole Miss might spike and get into the semifinal or even a national championship 1 year, but I don't think that's a recipe for consistency in the postseason. So this feels like a sweet spot to me between like 5 to 8 high impact transfers on your roster, but the rest developed in your program for a couple of years.
And now the one thing with Ohio State is like they also have at least 2 other transfers who are multi-year transfers, like Davison Igbinosun and Josh Simmons are on neither of these lists because they're not a transfer in this year, but they also weren't recruited to Ohio State. They're in their second years at Ohio State. So that's a different thing. But I think a lot, again, we fell in love. JC saying in the chat, Ole Miss had a ton and likely had no chemistry or culture. A lot of people fell in love with Ole Miss this offseason because of all the transfers. And again, Colorado and Indiana, they had great success built on that. But I don't know if it's the top level. I think it made a tremendous sense for Indiana and Colorado, but I don't know if it gets you in the semis. So their teams have different goals.
And Indiana is it's not quite a standalone, but it's a different dynamic. Indiana was, like as we've said, bringing the best of a already winning program with an established head coach, right? It's not right. You can't replicate that everywhere. So that's a little bit of an outlier, I think.
And as Larry is pointing out, Penn State, the only team with a non-transfer quarterback that's left, because Quinn Ewers was at Ohio State for a year and transferred to Texas. Wait till we get to the Penn State section here. There's a lot in a Penn State plan here. And Drew Aller as a 5-star quarterback in his 3rd year is at the top of the list of like, this is a plan. 5-star recruits among their top 30 players. This is what their high school ranking was, whether they came in as a recruit or came in as a transfer. Ohio State 8, Penn State and Texas 5, Notre Dame 1. What do you think of that?
I'm surprised by the 1, and it's not that my expectations for Notre Dame were to compete on the same level as like an Ohio State, but anecdotally, it seems like Marcus Freeman has had some recruiting juice in South Bend, and I think he has. If you look at like high 4 stars and balance of the class kind of stuff, but to still only have 1 5-star player is a little surprising.
It's also a reminder of like what we're talking about here with Ohio State. When Ohio State maxes out, right? It is. Anybody who follows recruiting rankings, this is not a surprise, but it's a reminder. It's a reminder of. Yeah, go ahead.
It's a little because Ohio State of those 8, I want to say 4 are from a 2021 recruiting class that have stuck around for 4 years, and that's not typical.
Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely. We have more. I like people asking questions. I'm going to answer some of these questions in the chat. Top 250 recruits in your top 30. So I like to use that. I mean, I think sometimes like 3-star, 4-star, 5-star is such a wide range. You can have a guy who's ranked like 58th in the country be a 4-star, and you can have a guy who's ranked like 311th in the country be a 4-star. So top 250, I think, is a good range. Watch the change here. Ohio State 22, Notre Dame 14, Texas 14, Penn State 11. So Notre Dame is last by a lot for 5 stars, is tied for second. We are talking exactly what you said. You know what you're talking about. But we're talking a lot of high 4 stars, depth of talent. This is where Notre Dame is absolutely doing work.
Yeah, Mark, I guess maybe the way to say that is Marcus Freeman has raised the recruiting floor quite a bit, I think, for Notre Dame. This academics being what they are at Notre Dame, I think the ceiling will always kind of be there. But he's done a better job, I think, than Brian Kelly did of making sure they're not taking too many like 3-star kind of guys.
Yeah. Okay. Next one up is class of 2022 players in the top 30. This had always been a thing. This is third-year guys. So this is, hey, third-year guys, they can't go to the NFL yet. This is often where I think, Bill, I've expected teams, you look for peaks here. Certainly that had been true for Ohio State in some years, but this is an important threshold to me. Do you agree with that?
Yes. Yeah.
Penn State leads the way. Penn State has 10 of their top 30 guys are third-year players, class of 2022. Texas 8, Notre Dame 7, Ohio State 7. So this is a point I want to make. This is a point I want to make about Penn State. But remember that they top this list. 5th and 6th year players in the top 30, right? So this is old. I kind of broke everything down like young, middle, old. Young is 1st and 2nd year. Middle is 3rd and 4th year. Old is 5th and 6th year. Just not a huge impact here. 5th and 6th year players in the top 30. Penn State 8, Notre Dame 8, Ohio State 7, and Texas 5. So it is just not, it is not like a huge, like it's a nice backbone, right? I mean, it's almost like, it's like 22% of your roster or whatever. But again, and I don't have the numbers from last year for Washington. Washington, I would have been 17, I think.
25.
Like
yeah.
Yeah. So these teams have a nice, out of your 30, like almost a third, have a nice. Texas, not quite as much, but they're not led by that. 1st and 2nd year players being young in your top 30. This is really injury driven. 10 of Notre Dame's top 30 players are 1st or 2nd year guys. That is remarkable. We're talking about Leonard Moore, true freshman corner, because Ben Morrison got hurt. We're talking Anthony Knapp, true freshman left tackle, because Charles Jagusaw got hurt in the preseason. That's what we're talking about. Texas 9, Ohio State 6. Like you would lean in. By the way, Ohio State's 2 best players. 1st year, Jeremiah Smith. 2nd year, Caleb Downs. A couple other guys working in there. Penn State 5. But there are a lot of things, Landis, when you really start going through, and I think, again, if you have not been following Notre Dame as a viewer or a listener much of the season, it is amazing they have gotten here with the injuries they've suffered. But one of the other charts earlier, the depth of talent is why. And they had young guys ready.
Yeah, that's I mean, I'm surprised Texas's numbers that high too, but no, that's a bit shocking to see a team that's relying on that much youth get to this point. Did you do 4th year guys?
Did I do 4th year guys? Yeah, you want 4th year guys?
Yeah.
You want a broken out fourth-year guys, class of 2021 by request. All right, can you write these down for me?
Yeah.
Penn State, 7 fourth-year guys. Notre Dame, 5 fourth-year guys. Texas, 8 fourth-year guys. Ohio State, 10 fourth-year guys. So I was
wondering, yeah, because I was like Ryan Day's thing is like it was like the basketball ideology of like get old wins, but then to see that Ohio State didn't have like an overwhelmingly high number of 5th and 6th year guys like kind of threw me for a loop. But it's because they have 10 4th year guys.
Yeah. Okay. So I want to draw conclusions here with a couple things, and we're going to start with Penn State first. And this is like, just as Doug's sitting around, goofing around with numbers. To me, what this roster breakdown tells us is that this was the year for Penn State. Now, if they can keep, just like Ohio State, you would have thought Ohio State last year was their year based on like, hey, third-year guys are going to hit, you're going to lose a bunch of the NFL. And then Ohio State just kept all those third-year guys around except for Marvin Harrison Jr. and Mike Hall. They literally kept everybody else. So if Drew Aller stays, if Nick Singleton stays, Abdul Carter's not going to stay. But like that kind of thing, like that's the conversation. But otherwise, I still think, Bill, targeting at a team when they have a really good recruiting class, when they have a peak recruiting class, I still think to myself, third year is when they got to make their money. They got to do their thing. And that to me is the story of this Penn State season.
Yeah, I think so. Because the dynamics of college football are changing where you can more reasonably I don't know, like project out that maybe you'll get some action from those guys in their 4th year too, but you can't bank on it. I don't think so. It has to be that third year. We've seen teams do it in the second year, like Ohio State in 2014 did it in the second year of that 2013 recruiting class. But I think third is more reasonable, and I think like I think right now everybody assumes, right, that Drew Aller's going to come back and Nick Singleton's going to come back. It's like, what if they win the national championship? Like, I don't,
right?
Are they really going to come back? So this was the year. I think you're right from a roster construction standpoint, but I think there's still like some lingering stuff out there. Like this has to be the year.
Yes. So let me give you like so the guys that we're talking about, these third year guys, if you're not intimately familiar with Penn State's roster, quarterback Drew Aller. Running backs Nick Singleton and Katron Allen, who came in as a pair and have absolutely lived up to it. And then on the defensive line, Abdul Carter, Denai Dennis Sutton, and Zane Durant. So it's like, oh, what'd you do? What'd you do to build your class? We got defensive line, running backs, and a quarterback. It's like great place to start. Plus your guy Venga Iwane on the offensive line is part of it too. But it's really Aller, the backs, and those 3 defensive guys up front who get after you. They had to do it this year. Carter's going to go. We'll see what happens with the other guys. But like this is, I don't know. We can have an offseason conversation about like, if this is the new Penn State every year now, but this had to be Penn State this year. This is their peak year, and that they took advantage of it. We understand SMU and Boise State. We get it. They did lose to Ohio State, but they competed with Ohio State. They competed with Oregon. They earned their spot in the playoff, and then they won the games they had to win. If they didn't get it done this year, really would have been disappointing. This is awesome that they took advantage of it.
Is this Bo Perbula's class too?
He's gone. He's dead. He's dead to me.
I know. But just the point, like further hammer home how much
Missouri
that class was.
Yeah. So I just like congratulations to Penn State on you could see it coming. You and I talked about it with like we were on different shows. We were like, oh, Drew Aller, give me year 3 of Drew Aller and let's see where they are. Where are they? In the college football playoff semifinals.
And I don't know, would you say like I don't think Drew Aller's played awesome, right? There's still like that thing out there. It's like, what if we get like a really good Drew Aller game, like an excellent Drew Aller game? I don't think we've quite gotten that yet.
Like I've already, so as soon as Notre Dame won, like I was at so I didn't with the change of the Sugar Bowl, I didn't stay into my hotel room. The night after the game, I just like went, my flight was at 5 a.m. So I just like I sat in the media room till 1:30 in the morning and then took a cab to the airport and sat in the airport. So I was just in the media room, like just talking to some Notre Dame beat writers and stuff. And it's like, hey, I follow Penn State and Notre Dame are so similar. The conversations you have about them are so similar, but I do think the separator is the Drew Aller what if, because as the whole conversation of like, we know who Notre Dame is, we know who Riley Leonard is. We kind of wonder what Drew Aller still could be. And we're going to wind up in our big game breakdown on Wednesday, breaking all this down. But the Drew Aller goes 27 of 34 for 312 yards is the thing that Penn State has that Notre Dame doesn't.
Does not. Riley Leonard does not have that ceiling. Drew Aller going nuclear. While like maybe you don't have a ton of faith in it happening, like it's still like in the corner of your mind somewhere. It's like, what if that happens? Yeah.
I mean, for like everybody thinks if he changes his mind and goes to the NFL, he'd be the third quarterback in this draft behind Shadur Sanders and Cam Ward. So, but it is hard to wrap your head around because there's a lot there, but then sometimes you watch Penn State win and he throws for 147 yards.
Right.
It's like, he's the what? He's the number, but it's because there are traits. There are traits. There are traits. That dude can rip it. That dude can read it. And that dude can move around. So like, there's a lot there. Okay. This was their year. We'll see if it maybe next year too. Notre Dame. The Notre Dame story to me is something that I already touched on, and it's depth of talent. And it's young talent. It's old talent. You look at their linebackers. They play Drake Bowen, Jaden Osbury as really young second-year guys. They play Jack Kaiser as a sixth-year guy who's played more games than anybody in Notre Dame history, right? They fit all that together. They've lost so much. But Gabriel Rubio being ready as a super young guy when Riley Mills got hurt is a perfect example of this. And they've done it at almost every position so that they only have one 5-star in their top 30, but they have so many highly rated guys and they're young and old. And if they didn't have this depth of talent, they wouldn't be here.
Well, like I think Rubio's inexperienced. He's not young. I think that's like Rubio's in his 4th year.
But that
like he's
right.
Yeah,
wrong.
But I think that speaks to your. I think that speaks to your point. Like it's like there are guys on this roster who maybe haven't had to prior to this year step up and do some stuff, but have been around the program a long time, and they've been developed and are ready to go when Notre Dame needs them. It kind of happened. I don't know. I would say it happened very much under the radar that Notre Dame built a roster that was sort of like this healthy and able to withstand all the losses that they had. But that's what's got them here. It's depth of talent, like you said.
Yeah. You just look like, for instance, their top defensive guys, just like where they were as a recruit. Xavier Watts was number 384. Aiden Schuler was number 318. Christian Gray was number 101. Leonard Moore was number 430. Jack Kaiser was number 409. Riley Mills was 159. Drake Bowen was 102. Howard Cross was 332. Jaden Osbury was 162. Like just a lot of guys like between 100 and 400, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which again is like, you're really good. If you're the 389th best player in the country in your class, you're excellent, right? So, and I think like this, to me, this is less of a one-year thing. This is like the new winning formula for Notre Dame. And then I think they have culture, I think they have connection, and it's like, just make sure you have enough good players. And I think Georgia knew that. One of my lights went out because I forgot. I did take my extension cord to New Orleans, and I forgot to plug everything back into the extension cords. Georgia knew this going in, Landis, that there was a real depth of talent to Notre Dame that maybe there wasn't quite as much there in previous years, which is why I really do think the conversation down there going into the game was like, this is not those previous Notre Dame playoff teams. But I think this is here to stay. You talk, I'm going to plug my light in.
No, I think it's here to stay too. And the thing that should be particularly encouraging about that is that Notre Dame is probably going to get off the transfer quarterback thing after the season too, with CJ Carr taking over for a couple of years. So like if you have a proven formula for basically every other position on the roster, and now you get the supplement's not the right word, but add to that more quarterback stability year over year, then that's how Notre Dame becomes a team that's not just here as like a blip on the radar, but a team that has some staying power in the postseason. So that we love Riley Leonard. He's done a great job for Notre Dame, but the next step for that program was be consistently recruiting that position so that they don't have to do that year over year. They don't have to go with this from Sam Hartman into Riley Leonard. They can go from Riley Leonard into CJ Carr and then build it around a couple of guys for multiple years.
Mine heard two thuds there. The first thud was the light falling over and hitting me in the head. And
Nice.
The second thud was the light falling over and hitting the wall. but it's kind of propped up and it's on now.
Is your head okay?
Bill, we have 3 Northern teams in the semifinal. Yeah. My head is fine. Next up is Texas. Homegrown talent. Bill, of their top 30, would you like to guess how many of Texas's top 30 played high school football in Texas?
19.
23.
Wow.
So just do this. And it is a reminder of like when Texas is not doing this, it's like, what were you doing? They're right there. They are right there. And maybe a couple of them, maybe a couple of the high school players have moms and dads and grandmas and grandpas that went to Texas A&M. Other than that, they all want to play for you. They don't want to play for TCU or Baylor or Houston. They want to play for the Longhorns. Pull your head out. They're all right there. This is one of those, like, you start doing stuff like this, it's like, what's the best job in the country? It might be Texas. Because they're just sitting there waiting for you.
So much talent. Yeah.
You don't have to do anything. It's like Sark's a genius. It's like, is he? Texas, when they were there, it's like Quinn Ewers grew up a Longhorn fan. He was dying to go to Texas. And Texas was such a mess. He was like, I guess I got to go to Ohio State. And then, like, they hired Sark and it was like, he's going to transfer back there. Because the minute Texas wasn't a dumpster fire, everybody in that state was like, can we please play for you? Congratulations to Texas for finally getting out of your own way. So this is like a little scary. So top 30, 23 Texas, 2 California, 1 each from Georgia, Hawaii, Louisiana, Missouri, and Colorado. 1 Northern guy. They don't got to come up here, Landis. They got all they need down there. I got north-south, by the way, for everybody too. So let's just be like, this is, if they're together, like if they have it together, they're not going away.
No, but it's Texas, so they're always on the edge of not having it together.
Always on the edge of not hitting it together. I didn't build a graphic for this. Do you want to? Let's do this really quickly though. Northern players on the 4 rosters by our definition of the North: Penn State 19, Ohio State 17, Notre Dame 16, Texas 1. Southern players by our definition. And so, like, if you're a California kid, you're not either of these lists, so these don't add up to 30. Southern guys: Texas 16. Wait. No, that's not right. Because like Texas is the whole thing. No, Texas is wrong. I did that wrong. Texas is like 29 or 27. Texas is, they had a Hawaii guy and 2 California guys. Texas is like 26. Texas 26. That's what it is. It's a typo. Southern players: Texas 26, Notre Dame 12, Penn State 11, Ohio State 10. Which might surprise you because I think people along the way always thought like, well, Ohio State does the best job of Northern teams of going out and getting Southern talent. Guess what? Notre Dame and Penn State are doing it too, which is not a small reason of why they're here.
I'm surprised. I'm not surprised by Notre Dame because Notre Dame recruits everywhere, but I'm a little surprised that Penn State has more.
Yeah, so like I'd count Virginia as the South, so that's part of it. But like, guess what? Okay. Go win in Virginia.
Yeah.
Hey, guess what? There's good players in Virginia. Go get them. Mm-hmm. It's really important. And Penn State has made some bones there over the years, but like, go do that. Yeah. Keep doing that. Tyler Warren's from Virginia. Super important. All right. Ohio State. To me, the deal here is you have to, and I've had various conversations over the years about this. I think it is the most underrated part of recruiting, and it is turning 5 stars into good players.
Yeah.
Because it's like, hey, congratulations on all your 5 stars, Texas A&M. Why are you 8-4? Because you're not converting anything. So I think people can take for granted stars matter, right? It's all about that. But really what it's all about is getting the talent and then turning the talent into great players. And so for Ohio State to have these 5 stars and then have them be as good as they are, I think is easy to take for granted, Landis, but I just don't think we should.
I don't think Ohio State fans do, because we're not too far removed from Ohio State's 2018 recruiting class that had 1, 2, 3. I think it had like 4 or 5 stars, and like 2 of them hit. Like, it's not there. I don't want to call what Ohio State's been prior to this year like a dip, but Ohio State has come up short of its expectations the last couple of years. I think a lot of that fueled by a 2018 recruiting class that was incredibly highly regarded that did not pan out the way people thought it was going to. It was like fine, but it wasn't elite like people thought it was going to be. It is taken for granted, but it's not a given. Like I think like that's the, you know, if you want to tip your cap a little bit, like part of the impressive thing about what Nick Saban did at Alabama is like he got elite players and he kept them elite players. Like that's pretty hard to do.
Yeah. So Ohio State between 2020 and 2024, right? The 5 classes that would be from freshmen to 5th-year players on this team. They brought in 17 5-stars, composite 5-stars by the 247 evaluation. And plus Caleb Downs was a 5-star who is now here as a transfer, right? So that's 18 5-stars that are on Ohio, that could be on Ohio State's roster. Let's say 18, okay? Mm-hmm. Of those 18, 2 are already in the NFL. Jackson Smith and Jigba and Paris Johnson, okay? Mm-hmm. 3 are true freshmen who are really too young to contribute. Jeremiah Smith already is, but Edric Houston, Mylan Graham, and Aaron Scott are not yet, okay? 3 of them have transferred out. Julian Fleming, who's a 5th-year guy, to Penn State. Mm-hmm. Quinn Ewers, who's a 4th-year guy, to Texas. So it's like, hey, look at those Ohio State 5-stars in the playoff. And then Kyle McCord to Syracuse. So those are the 3 transfers, right? That means of those 17 or 18, there's 10 guys then that really would be in a spot to contribute right now. 9 of those 10 are making huge contributions.
Yeah.
And 1's making a minor contribution. But that is Emeka Ibuka. That is Jack Sawyer. That is JT Tuimoloau. That is Travion Henderson. That is Jeremiah Smith. That is like, they are fueling this. And it's like, oh, congratulations. Your 5-stars are good. Yeah. Congratulations. Your 5-stars are good. It is a thing worth saying.
Who's the 1 minor contribution?
CJ Hicks.
Oh, right. Yeah.
As a linebacker edge guy who's a...
I would say Edric Houston's making more of a contribution than CJ.
Yeah. So, I mean, like that's... Yeah. Edric Houston is a little bit in the mix now, the defensive line. So anyway, but that's like, what are they driven by? Well, it's that they kept those guys around for a 4th year.
Yeah.
But it is that they all, like, there are not many like misses in there.
That 2021 recruiting class was, yeah. We thought it was a banger when they signed, and it ended up. Well, we'll see what they do with your end of career, but like,
I mean,
they became more or less what we thought they were going to be.
In my previous stops, you can go back and find shows where I'm talking about that 2021 recruiting class after they signed, and the whole conversation is, are they going to be the greatest team in college football history? And then they couldn't beat Michigan.
Yeah.
But also, I thought it was because Quinn Ewers was going to stick around and be the quarterback here. So, but you saw what you're seeing now. You've seen during their whole career what they can be, but you're really seeing it now because Jack Sawyer is playing the best football of his career right now. And Denzel Burke, after a rough game against Oregon in the middle of the year, is back and playing excellent football. And Travion Henderson is looking as fresh as a running back can look after 4 years and 14 games, and what he looks like right now is a game-breaking running back in a semifinal. I'm like, that's a huge deal. Emeka Ibuka.
Can I ask you about him, why you just mentioned him?
Yeah.
Have you seen a running back run faster than he ran on that touchdown against Oregon? I was like watching the highlight of it again, I think last night, and he looks like a 100-meter sprinter, just like out of the blocks, smoking everybody down the sideline. I don't think that's a running back move that fast.
Quick acceleration by him, and then nobody's catching him. So, like they're living up to the hype, and like we love hype. Everybody loves talking about recruiting, but there are schools still that when they sign big classes, you like you're like, okay, well, you signed a big class, but like, what's it gonna mean? And the whole point of Saban at Alabama and what Georgia has done lately, and this Ohio State team, is that it turned into something. So
that's probably another thing with these teams too. I don't think maybe Texas is the exception. Like Ohio State's not a big class school. Like they rarely sign huge classes. I don't think Notre Dame and Penn State do either, and yet they still built these rosters this way.
Yeah. So Penn State, this was the year. Notre Dame, depth of talent. Texas, homegrown talent. Ohio State, 5 stars hitting. To me, those are the encapsulations of why these teams are where they are with the way they built their rosters. And again, if you missed it the first time around, just as a reminder, like that, it really is their guys. And so if that matters to you, that their top 30 guys, Penn State 26 were recruited, Notre Dame and Texas 24 were recruited, and Ohio State 23 were recruited. I think it's fun for fans when it goes that way. We obviously know that transfers really matter, but you really build a relationship. You think about some of these guys commit 18 months ahead, and if they play 4 years, somebody's in your life for 6.5 years.
I was trying to figure this out on the bus back from the Rose Bowl. Jack Sawyer in particular at Ohio State. He's in his 4th year at Ohio State. He committed to Ohio State between his freshman and sophomore year of high school. So he's been a Buckeye for like 7.5 years.
Yeah. No, I like that. And I think that really at its heart, and the portal and NIL and everything is changing that to some degree, but that's really where the connection comes from, right? That is, as much as college football is obviously designed for players to move on, when you feel like you know them when they're young and you get excited in recruiting, and you really get to know somebody for 6 or 7 years. Can I just end with one thing here real quick that I just was thinking about? And maybe everybody's talking about it on the Ohio State beat, but I'm not aware of it. I think we made a big deal, justifiably so, like the Bosa family and their impact on Ohio State football. The Bosa family was part of Ohio State football for 6 years. 3 years of Joey and 3 years of Nick. We are a decade into the Hamilton family on Ohio State football.
Oh, no one's talking about that. That's really good.
Davon Hamilton, who went on to be, was he a 2nd-round pick or a 3rd-round pick at the Jaguars?
Third round pick.
Excellent defensive tackle. Played 5 years at Ohio State. Played 5 years. Very impactful years. Ty Hamilton, who starts at defensive tackle for Ohio State, is in his 5th year. They didn't cross over at all. One was in, one was out. That's a decade. That's a decade of the Hamilton family on the Ohio State defensive line. That is unbelievable. So you want to call some Hamilton family members when you're down in Texas. Like, that is wild. Is that not wild?
That is wild. And Devon Hamilton's last year, Ohio State had an awesome season and got to the semifinals and lost to Clemson. And he was like a very underrated part of that team.
Yes.
And the same thing now is true of Ty for an Ohio State team that's 2 wins away from going to get a national championship.
So anyway, all right.
Write that down.
This is a plan. So we're going to do the big game breakdown on Wednesday for Notre Dame Penn State in advance of that Thursday game. We're going to do the big game breakdown for Ohio State, Texas on Thursday in advance of that Friday game. We will have post-game shows after both games on Thursday night and Friday night. We will have a show tomorrow. The plan is for the show tomorrow to be at noon Eastern. I don't know if I'm going to be able to fly today. If I can't fly today, I'm not going to be able to do a live show tomorrow at noon. And so then that show will be moved. It will either be moved to later in the afternoon or possibly to the evening. But we will definitely have a live Tuesday show, one way or the other. We have some guests lined up, but if things have to move, whatever, we'll see what happens. But we're going like we're not going live every single day from now until the national championship game, but we're not taking many days off.
Most days.
So
yeah.
There's a lot of ball to talk about and a lot of Northern ball, and we want to bring you guys the best coverage of that, and we appreciate you guys being part of it. So thanks as always to our producer, Mike Urostowski, for making us look good and sound good. Thanks to you guys for being here. Certainly couldn't do this without you. And we will see you very, very soon. For now, he is Bill Landis. I'm Doug Lesmerises. And that was Kings of the North.